Beyond 3 D. Across the news. Okay, so for news this week, Matt, anything interesting come across your desk?
Oh, yeah, right. Oh, now that's interesting. Very interesting. And I'm looking at this. I'm going to have to save this.
Okay, Matt's just shown me a picture of Pluto off the NASA website, and it looks like an egg.
That is an absolutely gorgeous photo. Absolutely gorgeous.
We'll put that up on the Facebook page.
We're going to have to put that up on the Facebook page. That just looks spectacular as far as I'm concerned.
Wow, that's just amazing. I love the fact that it's not round. I like that.
It does look. It literally looks like an egg.
I wonder if that's got anything to do with the
ovoid,
the elliptical orbit that it travels in, because it does travel in a very wider orbit than the other planets or stars in our solar system.
It does. So at points in time, Neptune is actually further out than Pluto, and at other times it's the other way around. Yeah, interesting point. I'm just looking at that, and that is fantastic looking. And the thing that strikes me is you can get that far out into space and get an absolutely pristine, crystal clear photo of something like that. And everything around the moon and around Mars with all this stuff is as blurry as you can get.
Yeah, there's something going on there. I mean, that's a fantastic... What, is that taken with Hubble, would you say? Or no, Hubble's been and gone. It's on the far reaches of the solar system, isn't it?
I think what they're saying with Hubble is if it's not far out enough, they can't possibly focus.
Focus on it, yeah.
That is just amazing. That's spectacular.
Well, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so NASA's out there putting out the photos. Most detailed image of Pluto yet, so we'll have that up on the Facebook page, definitely.
I wonder how much digital editing has or hasn't gone into that photo.
Well, that's a good area for you to look at.
I'll have a look into that anyway. But September 23rd. The dreaded September 23rd. So allegedly September 23rd, which was this Wednesday gone, I think, for us. Might have been this Wednesday gone.
Yeah.
It was the date that was foreboding on the internet. There were lots and lots of different people claiming different things were going to happen, and everything from a false flag strike on US soil. So
right.
I did know that there were rumours for many years about a false flag nuclear detonation on Chicago.
Yeah.
I've heard that stuff for a long time
Sears
now.
Tower, that whole kind of thing.
That whole kind of thing. There was a hacker by the name of Goosefer. So not Goose or Lucifer, but Goosefer. There was a Romanian hacker by the name of Goosefer. His real name is Marcel Lazar.
Right.
It means nothing unless you want to Google his name, but he's just copped a 7-year prison sentence for hacking emails of Colin Powell and George W. Bush Jr. So he hacked into their private email accounts and came across documentation that promoted a nuclear detonation on US soil aimed at Chicago. Now, when you think about Chicago as a town, now, Matty, you know a little bit more about the towns and the cities in the USA than I do. Chicago's not really doing that great at the moment, is it?
Chicago has always been synonymous with corrupt politicians.
Okay.
Going back to the Dailies and coming forward, and now, who's the fellow that was Obama's chief of staff the first years? Emmanuel? Rahm Emanuel is the name, yeah.
Rahm Emanuel.
And dual Israeli-American citizen, a family in the IDF, or Israeli Defense Force.
Okay, yep.
That kind of person, and he took over as mayor of Chicago. Chicago has one of the largest crime and murder rates in the United States at this current time.
What about unemployment? It's high unemployment in Chicago as well, isn't it?
They're saying that it's running around 7%, but it's probably running closer to 15 or something along those lines.
That's pretty high.
Realistically.
So if you're going to pick an American city to hold a false flag in, and you actually were low enough to not worry about collateral damage, then Chicago would be a good city to pick, do you think?
Yeah, and if this person actually found so-called alleged emails in a folder that's talked about that, I believe the way I would describe it is a lot of different scenarios are talked about all the time. And
look, this stuff
things like that, emails like that can go back and forth talking about what if this were to happen in this place or that were to happen in that place. You never know. But interesting the fact that they could hack in and find these kind of things in files that are considered to be held by elitists, the high echelon of politics in the United States.
Well, look, you use words like elitist and politics and Hillary Clinton, for example. I mean, she got done for Emailgate when she had over 50,000 emails on her home email address that were both work and private. Mm-hmm. So if somebody had broken into a house and taken a computer, they would have taken a lot of very confidential government emails with us. So that just because they do it doesn't mean that it's right.
It happens.
Oh, it happens.
It absolutely happens. They just don't want to get caught.
But yeah, so Guccifer hacked into the private email accounts of Colin Powell and George W. Bush Jr. and found all this stuff regarding September the 23rd being a false flag for a nuclear detonation in Chicago. There's been a lot of talk about that, like I said earlier, over the years, and the date's been and gone. He's gone off to prison, and case closed.
Yeah. And the other thing I can say is if you're hearing this broadcast, the world didn't end.
No, it didn't end.
The Hadron Collider didn't send us all to the other side of a black hole and into another dimension.
Well, how do we know? It didn't.
I don't think it did, unless it happened actually, 3:30 last night, I did hear a few things outside, but I don't think it was anything more than possums, quite frankly. But no, I don't think the Hadron Collider opened up a gateway or a stargate or anything like that and sent us to another galaxy or dimension. I think we're still where we were before.
Asteroids, they were another culprit for ending September the 23rd. An asteroid was supposed to hit here as well.
There was a beautiful asteroid from over Thailand, over Bangkok in Thailand, from about 5 or 6 different camera positions coming into the atmosphere.
Oh, I did see that.
Exploding in light, and we actually had that up on the Facebook page as well, so that's something you can go back and take a look at. It really was a spectacular thing, all these different dash cams.
Well, this one was supposed to crash off the coast of Venezuela.
Right. And cause all kinds of havoc. Yeah. Nah, haven't heard anything about that yet either. Yeah.
Tsunami warnings. We have had a few tsunami warnings over the week.
They did have some, and I believe there were some 4.5 meter waves that hit the South American coast.
That's crazy.
Didn't really hear too much more about it, so there really wasn't maybe that not enough damage for them to continue to have it as newsworthy in the mainstream media.
Now, you mentioned something to me earlier that was quite interesting. Michio Kaku.
Ah, yes.
Michio Kaku claimed this week how many dimensions existed?
11.
11. Not 12.
No,
not 12. He knows that there's 11.
Well, based on his science.
His science.
Yes. And yeah, and
I watch your eyes roll back in your head when you say that, because it is one person's theory on principles.
It is.
It is.
I think it's ridiculous personally. I mean, I think every time I count numbers, I don't count up to 11 and say that's it. I know there are 12, 13, 14 into infinity, so I really wonder what some of the guys in science are talking about. I think what it comes down to is physics, string theory, and this is what they can prove or measure with their instruments.
Michio Kaku, I found him very interesting when he first hit the scene.
Yep.
He knew a lot about everything.
Yep.
It's like the persona of Michio Kaku has gotten bigger than the scientific face of alternative ways of looking at the world.
Yep. Yeah.
Which is kind of sad when that happens.
It is sad, but this is the thing that's going on right now. What is happening is that the scientific community is quickly finding out that a lot of their paradigms are being blown out of the water, for lack of a better term, and what they now have to embrace is the consciousness movement. And when they have to embrace something like that, they really have to start doing more work. They have to go back and do more research. And a lot of the books that they would poo-poo in the past now all of a sudden are coming to the forefront. So they're going back and they're looking at all the esoteric texts and they're trying to figure out, what was this person actually saying? Maybe there was some merit to what was being said by the ancient sages from yesteryear.
I just found the clip of Michio Kaku. I might actually play it right now. Do you want to listen to it?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Hang on a sec.
Andre, we believe, though we cannot yet prove, that our multiverse of universes is 11-dimensional. So think of this 11-dimensional arena. And in this arena, there are bubbles that float. And the skin of the bubble represents an entire universe. So we're like flies trapped on flypaper. We're on the skin of a bubble. It's a three-dimensional bubble. The three-dimensional bubble is expanding, and that's called the Big Bang Theory. And sometimes these bubbles can bump into each other. Sometimes they can split apart, and that, we think, is the Big Bang. So we even have a theory of the Big Bang itself. Now you ask a question, what about the dimensions of each bubble? Well, in string theory, which is what I do for a living, that's my day job, in string theory we can have bubbles of different dimensions. The highest dimension is 11. You cannot go beyond 11 because universes become unstable beyond 11. If I write down the theory of a 13, 15-dimensional universe, it's unstable, and it collapses down to an 11-dimensional universe. But within 11 dimensions, you can have bubbles that are 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional. These are membranes. So for short, we call them branes. So these branes can exist in different dimensions. And let's say P represents the dimension of each bubble. So we call them P-branes. So a P-brane is a universe in different dimensions floating in a much larger arena, and this larger arena is the hyperspace that I talked about originally. Also remember that each bubble vibrates, and each bubble vibrating creates music. The music of these membranes is the subatomic particles. Each subatomic particle represents a note on a vibrating string or vibrating membranes. So believe it or not, we now have a candidate for the mind of God that Albert Einstein wrote about for the last 30 years of his life. The mind of God in this picture would be cosmic music resonating throughout 11-dimensional hyperspace.
P-brain, yeah.
Wow, did you get that, kids? It's what I do for a living, he says. String theory. String theory, it's what I do for a living.
Showed us who's the other guy that does that? Sheldon Cooper.
Sheldon Cooper, yeah, he's fictitious, so.
Yeah, I know that.
I can see Michio Kaku walking up to a bar somewhere and putting his elbows out and going, "Hey, everybody, string theory, it's what I do for a living."
That's it.
Make way.
But that's the whole thing. It's 11. It's 11 based upon the math that he now knows. It's 11 based upon the theories that they can prove right now. It has nothing to do with going beyond what is seen.
I find that a very arrogant statement when he says nothing exists past 11. I'm pretty sure a couple of years ago there was no talk of even there being a second dimension, let alone 11. So pull your head in, Mitch.
Oh, it's amazing. I listen to that kind of stuff and I go, come on. It's once again, they don't want to admit that there are different dimensions. They don't want to admit that there are ways of looking at this universe that are beyond their science.
Speaking of which, The Martian.
Ah, yes.
The Martian. The Martian's coming out, or has come out.
It'll get out. I believe it comes out. No, it comes out on the 2nd of October.
2nd of October.
From what I'm understanding, yes.
Ridley Scott, Matt Damon,
and a host of others. Literally, a cacophony of all of the A-listers in Hollywood right now that are doing really well in movies are going to be somewhere in this movie, and what we are hearing is that it is going to be an excellent movie, worthy of Best Picture as far as an Oscar is concerned. So we will get out there, take a look at this movie, and we will give you guys a review.
The Christopher Nolan film, that Interstellar?
Yes.
Now, Interstellar was an interesting film. I found it really hard for some people. I didn't find it hard. I found it hard watching some people go into that cinema and come out of it not knowing what it was that they just experienced.
You're going to have to explain it to me because I never got to see it.
Multi-dimensions.
Yep.
So multi-dimensions. So Matthew McConaughey's character of an astronaut pretty much goes to the edge of the universe.
Right.
And he returns home in another dimension. Where he cannot interact with his family, but he can see his family. And a little secret that happens at the start of the film, in the home, in the family home, all this unexplained stuff that occurred. Turned out it was actually him in the future, in another dimension, and that was the only way he could interact with his family and get a message home.
Gotcha.
Very, very cool. Very, very cool with the concepts of extra dimensions and traveling beyond time and space.
Right.
We'd seen that stuff earlier in films like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yep.
Christopher Nolan brought these concepts back and sort of left it with the audience so that you were left, it wasn't crammed down your throat, it was left to permeate in yourself as you left the cinema, and a couple of days and weeks later to contemplate what it was that you just watched and what that was all about. The Martian, totally different film. What they're saying from what you've explained to me, that it blows Interstellar out of the water, but I'm not too sure. I find the film The Martian with Matt Damon being stranded on Mars more of a I don't call it a reality-based film. I'd call it more of a film to please the masses, where they wouldn't have to think too hard.
More for the mundane.
Yeah, but entertaining nonetheless.
I would think it would be entertaining, but what you just described to me about Interstellar, that's something that would make me think.
Yes.
That is very interesting. So I'm into movies like that.
See, I wish I had told you the little catch now. That
it doesn't matter. You can still go and see it, and you can start to really play around with, what about this? What about that? It makes you think, what about outside of what you normally can see? And I think that's very important, and that's what a movie's supposed to do. It's supposed to question. You're supposed to question things about it. You're supposed to make you think, expand your knowledge set, your knowledge base, get things out there, start thinking differently outside of the box.
We all have different movies too that resonate with all of us, and a lot of us have different films that resonate different messages that sit within us. And it's not until that film might be on TV, or we might see it somewhere else, or on somebody's collection in their house, that you're immediately reminded of what it is that resonates with you in that film. And it's always very personal.
It's really funny, not even in movies, but right now I go back and I'm starting to look. I got into the garage and started taking out all my old Star Treks and things like that. And I'm looking at the storylines for some of them, and they're just brilliantly written. Brilliantly written, and the messages are really, really clear. It's always a message of expanding, evolving. Yes, there is conflict, but you can resolve the conflict. I love things like that, which to me is a heck of a lot better than most of the, what I would call schlock that is on television these days, and just really bugs me to no end. So bring on more science fiction, bring on more thought-provoking television and things like that, not just mind-numbing entertainment.
I like the fact that with science fiction, they'll come up with ideas, but then science chases science fiction to work out how to make something like that work.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of it. It's the creativity that comes first, and then the science comes last.
Right. Well, personally, it'll be interesting. I think what we'll do is we will, in a future episode, take a look at The Martian, and we will do a review for it and let people decide what they think. But to be fair, we have to revisit Interstellar as well and take a look at that and see what feels better with us. Something tells me The Martian will be a really great movie, and the masses will love it. I just think that I'll hold my decision until I've seen both of them, and then I can really get into it and we can talk about it then.
What was that Ron Howard film what was the name of the Ron Howard film that he made in regards to the Apollo 11 mission? Do you remember what that might have been off the top of your head?
Apollo 13?
Well,
with Tom Hanks?
What's the one where they're stranded?
That's Apollo 13.
Apollo 13. I said Apollo 11. I don't know why I just mentioned that. I just totally forgot. I've gone brain dead now. Oh, that's what it was. The Apollo 13 mission.
Right.
That particular film celebrated the human endeavor and human invention and the spirit of ingenuity and not giving up. That's not what Interstellar's like, though.
No?
No. Interstellar was very much time displacements. So where you'd have half the crew making a mission to the local planet to check it out. The other half of the crew are doing an orbit around the planet.
Right.
And when the two teams meet up, aging has occurred, and the other team hasn't aged because they're in an orbital elliptical loop that's passing through time.
I see. Yep.
So if you get the mathematics down, it's the same thing where they turn and say time travel is possible when you pull away from a destination at a certain speed, and you get other people. Matt, I have no idea how it works. I'm sitting here pretending I know how it works. I have no idea how it works.
It's basically, it's like the speed of light. If something is 4 light years away, it's going to take you a certain amount of time to reach that point if you're traveling at the speed of light, and by the time you get back, time is continuing, and you have aged. You haven't aged, but everyone when you come back could be dead.
Yeah, so that's a lot of what happens in Interstellar. So, I think we'll check that out over the next week or two, and we'll do a comparison between that and The Martian.
I think it would be a really good idea, and let people know what we think, and then when they get out there, they can make their own opinions. But let us know what you think of things like that by getting on the Facebook page and just leaving your opinion there for us, and we can mention that on the air during our shows, what people out there are thinking about these different topics.
Now, just before we wrap up the news, do you want to talk about what kind of interviews with who we've got coming up over the next couple of weeks?
We will be talking to a few different people. One which will be great, Mary Rodwell, from up in Queensland, who is working in an organization with Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man on the moon.
I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I'm there on time for that, but I know I probably will just walk in the door at the last minute.
That's the way it works sometimes. Who knows?
Unfortunately.
We will be talking to her about what is going on with her interactions with children and the different things that they are coming up with, being that these souls are now coming in and are really advanced, and how they can be supported by what we as adults can do for them along those lines. We will be talking to another person, Robert W. Sullivan IV, who is a Freemason and a JD, a lawyer, and has written some phenomenal books on the Royal Arch of Enoch, about Freemasonry going back in time, and also did fascinating work, a book called Symbolism, which goes into a lot of the movies and how the different directors and all these different movies actually add in esoteric teachings and meanings, and he goes into detail about certain movies and the different meanings in those movies when you look at them.
I might have to ask him about Interstellar.
We could ask him about that. I don't know whether he's done that as far as reviewing. He might have done that because I know he is presently writing another book. We'll also get back in contact and start talking to Mr. Courtney Brown, a great remote viewer, and what his latest work is, not just the Lights of Phoenix, but going back to Atlantis and going back and remote viewing things like the pyramids and what they're doing as well.
He did a remote viewing aliens on how do you pronounce that?
Iapetus.
Aliens on Iapetus, with 2 separate remote viewers that came up with the same thing, Matt.
Exactly. He had a person that is basically in Hawaii and another person in Europe, and they blindly remote viewed a target, and literally the information they came up, not just being spectacular information, but accurate between the two of them from 2 sides of the planet. It was very uncanny, fantastic. So we'll be having guests like that, and a few surprises coming up down the road as well.
Chris Turner. I know Chris Turner. We're speaking to him, documentary filmmaker from the UK. His latest film, Don't Mention the Reptilians, which he's just shot, and I know he's in the middle of editing at the moment. He's interviewed people such as David Icke, Mary Rodwell, who you mentioned earlier, and a whole slew of who's who in the UFO esoteric field in regards to these reptilian entities that live, according to Chris and the people that he's interviewed, these reptilian entities that live beyond visible light. So we're talking about, again, another dimension, another light realm. So that's going to be a wild interview. I know we've got that coming up as well. So lots of interesting people coming up that we're talking to on Beyond 3D. So between myself and you and Steve and Heather, we should be able to plow through that and really, really nicely. And if anybody's got anybody that they would like us to talk to, just drop it mention it on the Facebook page, and we'll hunt them down.
Absolutely. If you have any ideas out there, guys, about people you really want to hear from, let us know, and we will seek them out and we will get them on this show for you, because the information is important.
That's it for today's news.
We will catch you next time.
Beyond 3D.
I wanted to mention something in this edition of Beyond 3D. After a couple of weeks ago when we talked with Eric Von Daniken, he had mentioned in that interview a book called The Keys of Enoch, Now, the Keys of Enoch was part of the Bible that was removed. There are a lot of things that were in the Bible that were removed, and they were removed by individuals who were leading at the time and wanted to make sure that the masses, the sweaty masses, basically stayed in check and in control. So anything that would allow a person to really truly figure out what they actually are, made in God's image, was taken out. Get rid of it. We can't have that. We can't have them knowing that they are more than we want to make them out to be. It would be worth it out there, in my opinion, for people to really look into the Keys of Enoch and to look into the other books of the Bible that were removed and find out what was actually said in there, because a lot of those lessons really can help you in learning what the truth is and what can really get you to the point where you are a fully integrated individual, a soul in a human form. So there are a lot of different keys in the Book of Enoch, and I'm going to read you something now from Key 3-1-1. In the physical world of creation, the tree of knowledge remains within the body of man as a crystalline galactic tree, connecting every finger and toe cell of his body with the light image process of his spiritual consciousness. Man lives in his garden of consciousness creation, receiving knowledge from the divine template and recorder cell through super holographic process. The super holograms within man are not dependent on the physical presence of waves, even though they are most readily described by the equations of physical waves. This non-dependence of holography on physical wave production is an important consideration in approaching the origin of neural holographic process. Here, the light wavelengths recorded in the brain coming from a template are considerably longer than those of the physical waves and can therefore be carriers of small amounts of information, even in the form of spatially interfering holographic patterns from other sources. A lot of people out there are doing research right now and trying to say that this world is nothing but a hologram and the Matrix movie kind of thing comes up. And in a sense, that's what we want to explore with this show. We want to see what information is out there, what science, cutting edge science is saying, what esoteric teachings are saying, and find out whether or not this world that we believe to be as real as it gets is nothing more than a hologram. You'll hear a lot of things talked about. And what happens is a lot of people today try to put it into scientific terms because they believe if they can speak from a scientific standpoint that they will carry more weight in their arguments. They don't want to understand that it's more than just that. There's a lot more going on here. And this is the thing. Everybody out there has experiences. You want to share those experiences with people. Great idea. You have to take one thing into consideration. If you share that information with the wrong people at the wrong time, all you will get is ridicule, chastisement, shunned. You can't do that. You have to really be careful with the information you share with people. There's two ways of looking at it. You can just let the chips fall where they may, put the information out there, see how people are going to feel about it. And if they think you're a little wacky, so be it. Or if you do it in the proper way, and you're coming from your own truth, it's irrefutable, in a sense. Yeah, there are a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists and scientists will say that if it cannot be proven, if it's not repeatable, it doesn't really exist. Well, don't believe that for a moment. There's such a thing as experience, and there's such a thing as observation. Two different things. It's one thing if you can play a piece of music and listen to it, you're observing. If you're playing a piece of music by playing a physical instrument, it's an experience. Two things, two perspectives. Don't forget that that can happen in the scientific field as well. You explain something that is a great experience for you, and the scientists will say, well, I can't use any of my instruments to repeat it. Therefore, what's going on here? This, in fact, could be a holographic universe. There is no way for it to be proven otherwise. Scientific measurements do not equate when it comes to this kind of stuff. Don't worry about what the science says. Your experience is your own. Remember it, honor it, and therefore pass it down to the people you care about, because it will save them the possibility of having to come through another lifetime and deal with it themselves. Getting back to key 3-1-1, what the key is actually trying to say is this. The mind is in a field of light, and a field of light within a field of light, and eternal light, and that eternal mind is constantly imprinting functions of the eternal in every form of life. The physical species then serves as one of the membrane types between star systems as a holographic within the mind. The membrane is instant media for the cosmic circuit. What they're basically saying is there is a center of the universe, and from that center everything comes. Therefore, always remember one thing. We all come from that center of the universe as well. We're connected to it. Don't let any science tell you otherwise.
Beyond.
3.
D.
That's just the lead up to the Loosh story.
Wow.
Do you want,
No,
me to
please.
continue into the Loosh story?
Go, yes, Duncan, you can't leave.
Okay,
You can't
now-
leave it.
Can't
like
leave
this.
it hanging like that. No way.
God. So the Loosh story is this, and it's in this context, you don't just read a brochure. You absorb and feel and understand and live the information. So it's an experiential. It's an experiential absorption of information rather than just getting it through the eyeballs, going through the brain and sort of rattling it around. But the story was this. Once upon a time, a long time ago, a lot of beings got together and they wanted to come up with a manufacturing method to obtain a resource which they all prized. The resource they all prized in their reality is called Loosh, Loosh. It existed naturally here and there, but these guys got together and they said, let's come up with some way of having this manufactured. Let's see if we can, manufacture this stuff. It'd be like the equivalent of someone turning, I guess, dirt into gold here on planet Earth. Not so much a greed issue. It was a resource, an energy, a drug. It's like a substance to them on a level we can't really comprehend. But the bottom line is we can comprehend it was a valued resource. Now, they looked around in the cosmos and found that this Loosh was being produced as a result of some interactions between different carbon and hydrogen and oxygen life forms, types of, I guess, bacteria. To cut a long story short, they set upon finding a place, they terraformed a planet, and they started experimenting with these different life forms. They found that they got some of this Loosh substance upon the termination or the extinction of these life forms. So they periodically upgraded the life forms into multicellular, complex life forms. They learned that conflict caused more of this Loosh. And basically what you read in the brochure was the history of planet Earth, from the terraforming parts at the beginning, but particularly the rise and fall of each of the different types of life form that existed on the Earth, the mass extinctions, and then leading up to their final creation. They found the ultimate life form, which produced this Loosh substance. To cut a long story short, was what we call the first humans. The progression was very interesting. They started off with literally cellular, bacteria level stuff. And when you read the Loosh story, and then you go back through the history books and you look at the mass extinctions and the type of life forms, which I've done, you see prokaryotes going into eukaryotes. Now you're talking about a cellular life form with no nucleus for a billion years, and then suddenly they're all gone, and we've got a new life form with cell nuclei and going off into all these different branches. So in some ways it negates the whole theory of evolution where one species turned into another, but it says that you had an intelligent bunch of beings who literally created these life forms for purposes. Now what was fascinating was you had a long period of our history where you have what we call the dinosaurs fighting and competing. They modified the dinosaurs, even in their own description here, to prolong conflict, because while they were fighting, they were giving off this Loosh. Now, at this point, I should tell you what Loosh actually is. Loosh is any strong feeling or emotion about anything. It can be a loving feeling, it can be a hateful feeling. The Loosh, which would be gathered at a football stadium at a big football match, would be enormous. The Loosh gathered above a movie theatre, in churches, any strong feeling. what they came up with was the final life form was actually a modified life form. These creative beings, they took their best life form and they put a bit of themselves in it. That's what they say in the story. A bit of the creator's essence was put into one of the life forms. That life form is what we call a conscious, sentient human. They then split us into two sexes, changed a few things around, put in a few receptors in our brain to enhance, etc. And so, from their point of view, all they want from humans, from the human body, is emotions and feelings. Hatred, war, love, they don't care. They just want the feelings. We emit every day what they want, and it's harvested periodically, it's harvested all the time. That's the general context. So basically, a long time ago, they set up what we would call a self-maintaining, self-reproducing factory, a biological factory. Now don't forget, inside all of this, you're only talking about the bodies that they've created. Those bodies, or biosuits, we are still an immortal spiritual being which has come along and chosen to inhabit one of these biosuits for our own reasons. So it's a big picture where you've got us as immortal beings of spirit wanting to come along for our own reasons and experience life as a human over and over and over. And you've got the very fact that we inhabit these biosuits. Half of the nature of our experience is generated through our feelings and reactions to what we're going through. So it's a big win-win-win situation, if you want to put it that way. We're not slaves. We're here by choice. We are enslaved to the beliefs and the cultures of each time period and culture that we're in. Now, some other little aspects of this are very interesting, because once they had set up this farm, or this garden, if you like, for their output, they installed a few supervisors or farmers just to keep it running and look after it. The human being that they created was literally taken and transplanted on many other places of the 3D universe, so that you've got other farms being created. So there's lots of our ancient ancestors would have been relocated throughout the cosmos. So then you've got others. You've literally got the context where you've got poachers and raiders coming along from time to time, inserting their genetic stuff into ours, doing projects with us. People coming along saying, look, we need lots and lots of gold from this planet. We don't want to dig it ourselves. Can we upgrade those humans a little bit to make them, make them be able to mine gold? I've often looked at what we call a civilization. Many of these civilizations that have arisen on planet Earth have startlingly interesting things in common. You've got people literally in family, tribal, nomadic situations like Australian Aborigines all across North Africa, but now and again you have these civilizations form, and the history in the story is the same. Beings from the sky come down, intermarry with some of the locals, take one of the tribes, appoint them as their sort of spokespeople, go through people, put them in control, and each time it's the same. They have a central currency. They teach the locals astronomy, agriculture, animal husbandry, architecture, engineering, water sanitation. They give them a whole lot of rules. Each particular time, though, is interesting. You have these people we call the priests. The priests are always put in charge of the bloodlines. For many civilizations, the priests chose who the rulers, who the pharaohs could marry and who they could not marry. They chose often right the way down to ordinary society. They determined who people could marry and didn't marry. The priests were the ones that communicated with the gods, the people from the stars. They maintained and looked after the currencies of all civilizations, which were always based on gold. And many cases, it was reported that the beings from the stars would come down periodically and take the gold away with them for their own purposes. My point here is that once this self-perpetuating biological factory was set up, they really haven't. They probably have no vested interest about who comes down here and does things. As long as they've got lots of humans going through lots of feelings, their end of the bargain is happy. But you've got an interesting situation, because you can see how the farmers would have looked at how to refine maximising the output. And what a better way to maximise output than to have a whole lot of fears of death, fears of the devil.
War.
In other words, religions were not only good for economic currencies, but they were very, very good for keeping people in line and generating lots of loosh.
Hey, Duncan, can I just... sorry, Duncan, to cut you off there. I've just got a quick question. You mentioned loosh, and it didn't resonate with me until you actually got to the end of what it is all about. And I have heard of it before, and where I've heard it before, Chris Turner's got a documentary coming out soon called Don't Mention the Reptiles, or Don't Mention the Reptilians. And I have read many times before, and I thank you for reminding me about this, that loosh is an energy field that apparently the reptilians are supposed to feed off in regards to human...
My understanding of the reptilians is that one of the main visiting races here, and they possibly are a type of installed farmer or CEO of the planet and its operation, people that we generally term the Anunnaki. Mm-hmm. One of their first attempts at a slave species was they took the predominant species at the time, which were saurians, and they put some of their own genetics in with the saurians, and they came up with the reptilian race. I don't think that that's totally what the end result was. The humans that we call ourselves now, we have the Anunnaki, what we call Anunnaki genetics and DNA in our makeup. Interestingly, the Anunnaki are not a pure species themselves. They've got lots of other civilizational genetic structures in them. So what I can say with authority in all this is, and some of this comes from my own intelligence connections, is that the human race right now has a lot of diverse alien and genetic DNA in our frequency. So what that means is that many races are technically eligible to interact with us on a genetic level. We could be seen, I mean, not only are we giving off loosh, but if different races got into our genes early on in the piece, depending on how the human race on this planet evolved, we pick up characteristics and strengths. The same way as if you took a strain of sheep and you bred them to be drought resistant or tick resistant, etc. You can modify and steer things to a desired result. The human race has definitely been steered and modified to a very interesting desired result, which is we've built up over the millennia a resistance to what we probably call negativity, and that's something which is I think starting to impact on mankind right now. Is the fact that once upon a time Earth was a paradise planet and we were putting out lots of very happy, positive loosh, but either by accident or by design, we were literally infected by a substance which infected the planet a long, long time ago. We would call the effects of that substance negativity. But that substance actually did have some form of physical and does have some form of physical form. It's being discussed these days as a type of very highly advanced nanite or artificial intelligence. Some people refer to it as black goo. Yeah. And I've got a lot of information on that whole topic, but it's in that scenario, and this has nothing to do with the Loosh story. This is branching off onto something on that substance. Look, I've trafficked with people in it's above intelligence community level stuff. I've dealt with people who are cleared into the alien sector. I mean, people who've read literally. You're an intelligence officer who's cleared to read Aliens 101. This is the book. I mean, these people literally do get that sort of briefing, and they have to read, digest it. They have to be cleared for it, and they're usually bloodlined from the families. It's the Royal Europe too in the intelligence community. They don't give it off to the riffraff. But what I'm saying is this: I know from those levels of intel that this substance is taken very seriously, and that quite a few years ago it was reactivated from somewhere deep in space. And it started spreading from under the Antarctic into the Gulf of Mexico, Falkland Islands. And behind the scenes, there was a lot of concern and activity, and measures are still being taken. But that stuff is described by more than one visiting race as a concentrated negativity, absolutely concentrated negativity. And the effects of it when it arrived here on Earth were very profound, and this is something you won't hear every single day. When that negativity arrived on Earth a long, long time ago, it changed the nature of everything. Before that time, death was considered a departure. You'd wave goodbye knowing you'd see them again. after it arrived, death became the end. We feared death. We started fearing each other, hating, worrying about the lack of competing instead of cooperating. The infection that we got was so profound, it literally seeped into the vibrational ether or aura of all living things. Everyone around the place was absolutely freaked out, and Earth was put under a quarantine. How far that quarantine extends physically, I don't know. But I do know that the quarantine extends a lot more than just physically. It extended non-physically. Pretty much so that any visiting souls and beings that came to Earth were stuck inside that quarantine. If you like, it created, and this came from an intelligent source. He says the quarantine. He says think. And it wasn't until he popped it into my mind. The whole, what we call the reincarnational cycle, is part of the quarantine. You don't get to leave this until you've conquered negativity. And when you think about it, those advanced souls that get to leave the planet or have a choice for another lifetime, they've usually overcome negativity and fear and have got a handle on things. And, the people you probably look up to a lot more in society, the ones that write books and do genuine things. So the quarantine, the nature of the quarantine is being quite severe. You don't get to leave this on a soul level, even as an immortal being of spirit, until you are eligible, until that quarantine is nullified. On a physical level, though, it presents a very interesting case, because as a physical species, we've now built up a growing immunity as a race to this negativity. Now, you can imagine that this overcoming this immunity, overcoming this negativity is of interest to other civilizations. And so we're finding some of the interaction with some of those civilizations and humans right now is to get our immunity into their civilization, because they don't want to spend millennia going through wars and religious hates and stuff. They'd like to maybe just go through it a bit quicker. It's obviously the experience of negative is considered a part of an evolutionary jump, that once you overcome it, you are much more of a being than you were before. You have much more understanding and comprehension of who you are.
Sorry, Duncan, to interrupt. I think you just answered the question of what is the meaning of life.
Well, you asked me what keeps me awake at night. Obviously, it's like everyone else. What is the meaning of life? What's going on down here? But I must say that if I was to nutshell it, it is that. There is, and look, when you look out in the, one of the expressions I've had in my life, which I've felt was the truth, was as above, so below. The whole idea of holographic fractals through nature and geometry, to me, fractals are literally a mathematical representation of as above, so below. And so if you look out into, say, a park or a garden, what do you see? You see millions of different life forms of all shapes and sizes going about their daily duties, most with no comprehension of the ones around them, none with any idea of how they interact with each other. You've got humans walking by, cars flying overhead. That doesn't stop there. It goes on above us, and we are on one level. We are like the ant running around doing our business. We don't even comprehend or see the cars, the planes. We have no comprehension of the context of what's going on. It's a very important thing to consider looking upwards, is that a lot of the stuff, our brain is not designed to even comprehend the context of it. It's probably enough to know that life goes on above us, as complex and as varied as those who appreciate how complex and varied life is, alongside and with us.
Indeed,
I guess what's exciting for me at it all, and as the question I still ask, is if that was the case, it means planet Earth was a very special planet. It would be the planet where it all started, and a lot of the physical life forms were taken from and taken elsewhere. And on that level, it's sort of, interesting. It's like, I guess, that Loosh story implies planet Earth is where it all started. What's interesting for me is when you read a lot of the communications between Earth people and visiting aliens, even those who get to visit other places, I've never heard of any other alien planet with more than maybe half a dozen native life forms. The amount of life, the variety of life here on planet Earth right now it seems to be way more than anything else out there in the cosmos. And interestingly enough, if you know your history, the number of different life forms around the planet at the moment is considered only 5% of what was originally here. So, you know, this seems to have been the key laboratory planet, if that is the case. And so in many ways it could be where the centre of the action is. I don't understand the politics of it all. I would say to people, look, you know, you hear stories of reptilians and greys and insectoids, etc., and you hear stories and claims of fighting and competing and taking sides. One thing I will say is that there is a lot of vested interest in getting people to take sides and to fear invasion, fear attack. In the story I've just outlined you, it would be like the farmers attacking the cattle, you know. It just doesn't happen. There may be, you know, strays that come along that maybe want to grab a few of the cattle and the farmers here have to chase them off. That might be the case, but I do not buy into the fear of invasion, and I'm telling you very clearly that there is plenty of money available for those who want to spread that story in print with authority. It's a story coming from the military-industrial complex and from the factions that seek control. They will propagate in the future fear of some invading aliens, and they'll have good evidence, you know, just like you've got beheading videos to make you fear ISIS. They'll come up with very believable and emotive stories to make you fear aliens, and you could end up with a worst case scenario where children are dobbing in their parents, brother versus sister. It would run very deep if they did play that card. But it will be total rubbish. It won't be the case. It will be a social control mechanism. And they may use advanced technology to deliver it. They may even get, you know, some of the visitors to pose or do a few shoot-ups to make the point home. If that comes to that, that will be a social control mechanism. Generally speaking, there is an amazing amount of cooperation between the hundreds of visiting races and civilizations. There's a lot of respect for what we've been going through here on planet Earth on one level, and on another level we're just cockroaches. not to be squashed, but, you know, I mean, in the scheme of things, we know diddly squat. And but look, every life form has its place and its role, and the smarter ones know that. I would say to anyone listening, just because they've got more advanced technology does not make them smarter about life, the universe, and everything. Doesn't even make them nice. One thing I can report is that every visiting race and civilization out there, they are visiting for their own needs. There's no benevolence, oh, we love planet Earth, we're going to raise them up. If there is, it suits their own desires, goals and agendas to have us feel that, believe it, etc. Everyone is out there doing it for themselves, and of course, the more mature you get, you realise that cooperation and creating win-win-win situations is going to get you a lot further than if everyone's doing, you know, in it for themselves.
Well, we could probably go on and talk about that for several hours. I think we'll probably have to catch up with you again at some stage in the future, if that's okay. But before we leave you, because we are aware of time going by, we'd like you to talk just a little bit about the conference that's coming up in Melbourne this week.
Okay, we've got, each year I do a big Nexus conference up in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and this year I decided that I'd get a couple of people from the Ancient Aliens TV series over here. One's my good friend David Hatcher-Childress, who I met in the 80s when he was visiting Australia, and a person who's inspired many people, probably like yourselves and myself, Eric von Daniken. Yes, so we're bringing them down. Well, they've just arrived here in Melbourne today and last night. So this Friday night at the Athenaeum Theatre, we've got Eric von Daniken and David Hatcher-Childress doing a presentation. There'll be a PowerPoint slide presentation of what they consider the latest and the greatest. Then they're going to Sydney on Saturday night, Brisbane on Wednesday night, and then they're going up to the Novotel at the Nexus conference, and they'll be doing a presentation there and having a bit of a relax before they leave and go off again.
Fantastic.
So if anyone's interested, tickets are at the door, 6 p.m. at Athenaeum Theatre this Friday night, or you can go online and get through Ticketek.
And we certainly encourage everyone to get down there if they've got even the slightest interest in any of these subjects, or if they've seen the Ancient Aliens television show. We definitely suggest that people get down there and see these wonderful gentlemen who have obviously got a lot of very interesting information to present to everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're a fan of Ancient Aliens, you know who they are. I'm a great fan of that TV series. I really think it's fantastic. It asks so many questions. It doesn't tell you what to believe.
Yes, I agree. Yes,
Duncan, on behalf of Matt, Steve, and myself, we'd like to thank you for joining us on Beyond 3D today.
Well, I'd like to thank you. I don't have this sort of conversation with many people. So
well, you're basically right now talking to three people that have done a lot of studying and are really interested in a lot of information and really interested in listening to people who have experiences. So I think it's great. I just absolutely love this conversation we've had with you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Hopefully we can talk to you again sometime in the near future.
I'd be into that for sure, absolutely.
Fantastic, Duncan. Once again, thank you very much.
Thanks,
All right,
Duncan.
guys.
Take care.
Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.